The massive chamber of the Galactic Council Station floated in the darkness of space above the neutral world of Kepler 442b. Inside the Grand Hall, 12 different alien species sat in their designated seats, each one representing millions of worlds and billions of lives across the galaxy. The air hummed with tension as the weekly council meeting prepared to begin. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the human delegation table, his dark suit a stark contrast to the colorful robes and metallic armor worn by the alien representatives. Beside him, diplomatic advisor Lisa Thompson shuffled through her electronic notes while Commander Rick Davis kept his eyes fixed on the security exits. The three humans looked small and insignificant compared to the towering aliens around them. "Hi." Counselor Vextar of the Zeltharian hegemony rose from his seat, his forearms spreading wide as he addressed the chamber. The reptilian creature's scales gleamed under the artificial lights as he spoke in his booming voice. "Fellow council members, we gather today to address the growing threat posed by the human species to galactic stability." Jake felt his jaw tighten as murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. He had heard these accusations before, but they never got easier to listen to. The humans had done nothing wrong except expand their colonies and defend themselves when attacked. Trade Minister Kilthis of the Morphic Confederation clicked her mandibles together in what passed for approval among her insect-like species. The humans have been disrupting established trade routes for decades. Their merchants undercut our prices and steal our customers with their so-called fair dealing. Fair dealing that involves actually delivering goods on time at agreed prices, Lisa whispered to Jake, her voice barely audible. Speaker Lumara of the Etherian Collective pulsed with soft blue light as she communicated through her telepathic abilities. "The ancient wisdom of our people warns against rapid expansion without proper oversight. The humans grow too fast and spread too far." More voices joined the chorus of complaints. The Vorthans whined about human colonies refusing to pay tribute to their trade guilds. The Kishanti complained that human diplomats would not bow and scrape before their nobles. The Zentarians demanded that humans share all their military technology while offering nothing in return. Jake listened to each accusation with growing anger. For over 200 years, humanity had tried to find its place in galactic civilization. They had offered friendship, trade partnerships, and technological cooperation. In return, they received demands for submission and threats of military action if they refused to comply. "The time has come for decisive action," Vextar announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The Galactic Council hereby orders the human species to surrender control of their military fleet to Zeltharian supervision. All human colonies beyond the Sol system will be placed under the protective administration of Council-approved species." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He felt Lisa tense beside him, while Rick's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. Around the chamber, alien representatives nodded their approval or made their species equivalent gestures of agreement. Furthermore, Vextar continued, clearly enjoying his moment of power. "A human home world of Earth will be subject to orbital monitoring by Zeltharian peacekeeping forces. Human technological development will be supervised to ensure it does not threaten galactic stability." Jake stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor in the sudden silence. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him as he looked around at the faces of the alien representatives. Some showed smug satisfaction, others nervous anticipation, but none showed anything resembling friendship or respect. "We came here seeking partnership," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We offered trade, knowledge, and cooperation. We asked only to be treated as equals among the stars." Vextar's scales bristled with irritation. "The Council has spoken. Ambassador Morrison, your species will comply with these directives, or face the consequences of continued defiance. Jake felt a cold smile cross his face as he looked up at the arrogant alien. You speak of consequences, Counselor Vextar. Let me share some consequences with you. He turned to address the entire chamber, his voice growing stronger with each word. You demand our military fleet, but that fleet protects more than just human worlds. 16 alien colonies rely on human naval patrols to keep pirates and raiders away from their shipping lanes. Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jake pressed on, his smile growing wider. You want to supervise our technology, but your own systems depend on human innovations. The life support systems on this very station were designed by human engineers. The quantum computers that manage your trade networks run on algorithms written by human programmers. The medical equipment in your hospitals incorporates human biotechnology. Kilfis clicked her mandibles nervously. These are minor dependencies that can be replaced, can they? Jake asked, pulling out a small device from his jacket. This contains a complete list of human contributions to galactic civilization. Shall I read some highlights? Without waiting for permission, he activated the device. A holographic display appeared above the delegation table, showing streams of data that made several aliens gasp in recognition. 87% of interstellar navigation systems use human-designed software. 63% of orbital defense platforms incorporate human engineering. 49% of medical facilities across the galaxy depend on human-trained staff or human-built equipment. The chamber erupted in worried chatter as the implications became clear. Vextar slammed his appendage on the council podium, trying to restore order. This is irrelevant, the Zeltharian leader declared. The council has the authority to redistribute these resources as needed for galactic security. Jake's laugh was cold and sharp. Authority? Based on what agreement, Counselor? The membership accords that your species signed when joining galactic civilization, Vextar replied confidently. Check your records more carefully, Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. Humanity never signed any binding membership agreements. We were granted observer status only, with the explicit understanding that we maintained full sovereignty over our territory and citizens. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa pulled up the legal documents on her tablet, broadcasting them to the chamber's display system. The text was clear and undeniable. Humanity had never formally joined the Galactic Council as a subject member. This is a technicality, Vextar sputtered, his scales now shifting to angry red patterns. Your species has benefited from Council protection and must accept Council authority. Protection? Rick Davis spoke for the first time, his voice filled with bitter amusement. When the chronic slavers attacked our colony on New Brisbane, where was Council protection? When the Void Hunters raided our shipping lanes, who came to our aid? We protected ourselves, Counselor, just as we always have. Jake nodded toward his military advisor before turning back to face the chamber. You speak of authority and membership, but what you really want is conquest. You demand our surrender disguised as cooperation. You offer nothing while taking everything. This is not partnership, it is subjugation. Vextar's voice rose to a near shriek. You cannot simply reject the will of the Galactic Council. Your species will comply or face the combined might of our united fleets. United fleets? Jake asked with genuine curiosity. The same fleets that depend on human-maintained navigation systems? The ones with human-designed weapons targeting computers? The vessels whose life support systems were built in human shipyards? The truth began to dawn on the alien representatives. Their technological superiority was largely an illusion built on human contributions they had taken for granted. Without human cooperation, their advanced civilization was far more fragile than they had realized. This is your final opportunity, Vextar declared, though his voice now carried a note of desperation. Submit to council authority or face isolation from galactic civilization. Jake looked around the chamber one last time, seeing the mixture of arrogance, fear, and greed on the alien faces. These beings had never wanted humanity as partners. They had wanted servants, suppliers, and subjects. The offer of friendship had been a lie from the beginning. "Very well," Jake said calmly. "We reject your terms completely." He turned to Lisa and Rick, nodding toward the exit. "Pack everything. We're going home." As the human delegation walked toward the chamber doors, the aliens sat in stunned silence. No species had ever simply walked away from the Galactic Council before. The precedent was unthinkable, the implications terrifying. "You cannot leave," Vexstar called after them. "Your species needs galactic civilization. You will be nothing without us." Jake paused at the chamber entrance, looking back over his shoulder. "Counselor Vexstar, I think you have that backwards. We're about to find out who really needs whom." The doors closed behind the humans with a soft hiss, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate what they had just unleashed. For the first time in their history, they would discover what their civilization looked like without human hands to maintain it. In the corridor outside, Lisa looked at Jake with concern. "Are you sure about this? The economic disruption alone could cause massive problems." Jake's expression was grim. 3 weeks after Ambassador Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, the largest coordinated withdrawal in known history began across human space. Admiral Karen Wells stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching her tactical displays as hundreds of ships moved in perfect formation across dozens of star systems. Status report from Centauri sector, called out her communications officer, Lieutenant Brad Cooper. New Austin colony evacuation is proceeding on schedule. Captain Rodriguez reports all civilians will be clear in 6 hours. Karen nodded, her weathered face showing no emotion as she coordinated the massive operation. 47 human colonies, 16 research stations, 23 mining facilities, and countless smaller outposts were being evacuated simultaneously. It was a logistical nightmare that only human efficiency could make possible on the agricultural world of New Austin. In the Centauri system, Captain Tony Rodriguez supervised the final phases of evacuation. The planet had been humanity's greatest success story in galactic space, transforming a barren rock into fertile farmland that fed 12 different alien species. Now that same farmland was being systematically destroyed. All transports loaded and ready for departure, reported his second-in-command, Major Steve Parker. Final demolition charges are in place. Tony looked out at the golden wheat fields that stretched to the horizon. 5 generations of human families had worked this soil, built these irrigation systems, and created something beautiful from nothing. The aliens had demanded it all be placed under their supervision, treating human achievements as if they belonged to the galaxy rather than to the people who built them. "Execute Scorched Earth Protocol," Tony ordered, his voice heavy with regret. Fusion reactors that powered the colony overloaded in carefully controlled explosions, sending mushroom clouds rising into the pale sky. The advanced irrigation systems flooded with salt water, poisoning the soil for decades to come. Atmospheric processors released biological agents that would make the air toxic to most known life forms. "Sir," Major Parker asked quietly, "was this really necessary?" Tony watched the flames consume the agricultural center that had taken 50 years to build. "Steve, they wanted our technology without our permission. They demanded our colonies without our consent. If they think they can steal what we built, they're about to learn otherwise." Similar scenes played out across human space as the withdrawal continued. On the research world of Haven 7, Dr. Amanda Price supervised the destruction of humanity's most advanced laboratories. Quantum computers that had taken decades to perfect were reduced to slag in minutes. Genetic databases containing the biological, Secrets of hundreds of species were corrupted beyond recovery. Dr. Price called her assistant, Dr. Frank Miller. The Etherians are offering to purchase the quantum research data for 10 million galactic credits. Amanda laughed bitterly as she initiated another deletion sequence. Frank, tell them they can discover quantum mechanics the same way we did, through centuries of trial and error. The experimental faster-than-light communication array, humanity's greatest technological achievement, disappeared in a ball of superheated plasma. If the aliens wanted to communicate across interstellar distances, they would have to rebuild the entire system from scratch without human knowledge. In the asteroid belt around Kepler 186, the Kirkland Mining Consortium was conducting its own withdrawal. Mine supervisor Carl Johnson watched as massive excavation equipment was loaded onto cargo haulers, while explosive charges were planted in every tunnel and shaft. 30 years of work, muttered his foreman, Bob Stevens, as he sealed the last of the mining computers. We pulled more rare metals out of these rocks than the rest of the galaxy combined. Carl nodded grimly. And they wanted us to hand it all over to Zeltharian oversight. Let them dig their own holes. The explosions that followed were visible from 3 systems away, as asteroid after asteroid was reduced to worthless gravel. The mining equipment that couldn't be evacuated was destroyed rather than left for alien hands. Advanced ore refineries became twisted wreckage, their technological secrets buried under tons of rock. But the real shock to galactic civilization came when humans began abandoning their positions throughout alien society. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, human engineers walked away from half-completed construction projects, leaving massive orbital stations hanging in space like metal skeletons. Engineer Chief Gary Wilson received frantic messages from his alien supervisors as critical systems began failing without human maintenance. Mr. Wilson, please reconsider, pleaded the Morthic project manager. The atmospheric recycling system is showing error codes we don't understand. The artificial gravity generators are producing dangerous fluctuations. Gary's response was brief and final. I'm heading home. Good luck figuring it out. Across the galaxy, human doctors packed up irreplaceable medical equipment and walked away from alien hospitals. Dr. Helen Carter had spent 15 years training alien physicians in advanced surgical techniques. Now she watched as her alien colleagues pleaded with her to stay. Dr. Carter, without your expertise, our mortality rates will double, begged Dr. Zilthara, her Vorthan counterpart. Innocent patients will die. Helen continued packing her specialized surgical instruments, devices that had been handcrafted by human artisans over decades. Dr. Zilthara, I offered to train more of your people in these procedures. Your government said human medical techniques were primitive and unnecessary. Apparently, you can manage without us. Human teachers deleted their lesson plans and withdrew from interspecies education programs, taking with them the linguistic databases that allowed different species to communicate. Human pilots abandoned their posts, leaving alien ships stranded in spaceports with no one qualified to navigate the complex hyperspace routes. The economic impact was immediate and devastating. Shipping routes that had operated flawlessly for centuries ground to a halt as navigation computers began producing error messages in human languages that no alien could read. Trade negotiations stalled when alien diplomats discovered they had learned galactic standard languages from human tutors who were no longer available. On the council station, emergency sessions convened daily as reports poured in from across the galaxy. Counselor Vexstar tried to maintain his composure, but panic crept into his voice during each broadcast. The human withdrawal is causing temporary disruptions to some galactic services, he announced to the assembled representatives. The Council is implementing contingency plans to address these minor inconveniences. The inconveniences were anything but minor. The Morthic trade networks, which had operated smoothly for over 3 centuries, collapsed within days as their logistics computers began making increasingly erratic decisions. Ships arrived at the wrong space stations, cargo was routed to incorrect destinations, and the automated systems seemed to develop minds of their own. Trade Minister Kilthis chittered nervously as she read report after report of commercial disasters. How did we become so dependent on human systems without realizing it? The answer was simple but terrifying. Humans had integrated themselves into galactic civilization so thoroughly that removing them was like pulling the foundation stones from a massive building. Every system, every network, every critical piece of infrastructure had human fingerprints somewhere in its design or operation. Zeltharian military ships began experiencing mysterious system failures as their human-designed components lacked proper maintenance. Weapons targeting computers developed calibration errors. Life support systems produced dangerous atmospheric mixtures, and communication arrays transmitted nothing but static. Admiral Klextar of the Zeltharian fleet received increasingly desperate reports from his ship commanders. Sir, the ZHS Conqueror is reporting total navigation failure. The ZHS Destroyer has lost life support on decks 4 through 7. The ZHS Retribution is drifting powerless after its fusion reactors shut down. What about our maintenance crews? Klextar demanded. Sir, our technicians don't understand the human components. The technical manuals are written in human languages, and the diagnostic systems require human authorization codes that we don't possess. The Etherian knowledge archives, repositories of millions of years of accumulated wisdom, became inaccessible when their human-programmed search algorithms stopped functioning. Ancient texts that had been digitized using human technology were trapped behind security systems that no alien could bypass. Speaker. Lumara's telepathic distress signals reached across her entire sector as she realized the scope of the disaster. Our heritage, our history, our very identity is locked away behind human-designed barriers. Without their assistance, we may lose access to our own cultural records. On colony worlds throughout the galaxy, alien governments discovered that their supposedly independent infrastructure was actually maintained by human contractors who had taken their expertise with them. Power grids failed, water treatment plants stopped working, and communication networks went silent as complex systems broke down without proper maintenance. Governor Yuldesh of the Kishanti colony Bright Harbor sent desperate messages toward human space. To any human receiving this transmission, we are offering triple standard wages for technical assistance. 6 months after the human withdrawal began, galactic civilization faced its worst crisis in recorded history. What had started as economic disruption had evolved into complete infrastructure collapse that threatened every aspect of alien society. The first major disaster struck the Kishanti home system when their orbital defense grid failed in spectacular fashion. Defense Coordinator Yilmesh watched in horror as massive energy weapons designed by human engineers began overloading during what should have been a routine test firing. The targeting computers, running on human-written software that hadn't been updated in months, started producing cascading errors that spread through the entire network like a virus. Shut down all weapons platforms immediately, Yilmesh ordered, but his technicians could only stare at control panels filled with error messages, written in human languages they couldn't read. The first explosion destroyed the primary defense, stationed in a ball of superheated plasma visible from the planet's surface. Within minutes, 2 more platforms suffered similar failures as their overloaded systems consumed themselves. A debris field from the explosions damaged several other installations, creating a chain reaction of destruction. Sir, reported his chief technician, his voice shaking with fear, the backup systems are showing the same error codes. The human-designed safety protocols are failing across the entire network. Yilmesh had spent his entire career managing the defense grid, but he had never bothered to learn how the human components actually worked. Like most aliens, he had assumed the technology would simply continue functioning forever with minimal maintenance. On Earth, director Ben Clark watched news broadcasts of the Kishanti disaster from his office in the rebuilt Colorado Springs facility. As the former head of Human Engineering Services for the Galactic Council, he had warned about exactly this kind of failure for years. "We told them the maintenance cycles were critical," he said to his colleague, Dr. Helen Carter, who had returned from her medical work in alien space. "The quantum targeting matrices need recalibration every 90 days, but they ignored her recommendations." Helen shook her head as she watched the casualty reports scroll across the screen. 17,000 dead in the first platform explosion alone. All because they thought our expertise was expendable. The disaster in Kishanti space was only the beginning. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, the economic heart of 3 different species, the situation deteriorated rapidly as the complex logistics network began making increasingly bizarre decisions. The artificial intelligence systems that managed planetary commerce had been designed by human programmers who understood the delicate balance between supply and demand across dozens of worlds. Without proper updates and oversight, the AI began following its original programming with mechanical precision, regardless of changing circumstances. Massive cargo ships arrived at stations that had been closed for months, only to find their designated berths occupied by emergency refugee vessels. Automated trading algorithms continued buying and selling commodities that no longer existed, creating phantom markets worth trillions of credits. The shipping computers routed temperature-sensitive medical supplies through regions of space known for extreme radiation, destroying entire hospital shipments. Governor Paul Mitchell had once managed the human operations on Nexus Prime, coordinating the smooth flow of goods and services that kept the planet functioning. Now he received dozens of desperate messages daily from his former alien colleagues. "Mr. Mitchell, please reconsider your departure," begged Sector Manager Thiliana in her latest transmission. "The shipping algorithms are directing all grain supplies to mining stations while sending construction equipment to agricultural worlds. Our food distribution network is collapsing." Paul's response was broadcast across the emergency channels that aliens were using to try reaching human engineers. "Thiliana, your government chose to place human operations under alien supervision. You have that supervision now. Supervise it." The Vorthan manufacturing sector faced its own catastrophe as production lines across their industrial worlds began creating defective goods at an unprecedented rate. The quality control systems, originally calibrated by human technicians, had slowly drifted out of specification without proper adjustment. Factory manager Kelter watched in despair as his assembly lines produced consumer electronics that exploded. When activated, vehicles with wheels that fell off during operation, and food processing equipment that contaminated everything it touched. The sophisticated machinery that had made Vorthan products the envy of the galaxy was now producing dangerous junk. "How long since the human technicians performed system calibration?" he asked his production supervisor. "Not since they left, sir. We assumed the machines would continue operating within normal parameters indefinitely." The assumption proved catastrophically wrong. Entire batches of products failed safety inspections, leading to massive recalls that bankrupted smaller companies and damaged the reputation of Vorthan manufacturing across the galaxy. Consumer confidence plummeted as news spread of Vorthan products causing injuries and deaths. But the most shocking revelations came from the medical sector, where alien hospitals discovered that their life support systems incorporated human design safety protocols that required regular updates to function properly. Without these updates, critical equipment began failing at alarming rates. Dr. Zil Thara of the Vorthan Medical Center stared at the casualty reports with growing horror. Incubation chambers for premature infants were developing temperature fluctuations. That proved fatal. Surgical robots were making microscopic errors that caused internal bleeding. Life support systems for critical patients were shutting down without warning. The human safety algorithms were designed to evolve and adapt to new medical situations, she explained to the hospital board. Without human oversight, they're reverting to basic functions that don't account for our specific patient needs. The Etherian Medical Council estimated that thousands of patients across the galaxy were dying from preventable equipment malfunctions. The sophisticated medical technology that had saved countless lives was becoming a source of death and suffering. Dr. Susan Adams, formerly the head of Interspecies Medical Cooperation, received frantic communications from medical centers throughout alien space. Her former colleagues pleaded with her to return and help repair the failing systems. Dr. Adams transmitted Dr. Morkef of the Central Etherian Hospital. Our infant mortality rate has tripled in the past month. The incubation systems you designed are producing fatal errors. We're begging you to help us save these children. Susan's response was broadcast on medical emergency channels across the galaxy. Dr. Morketh, we offered to train your medical staff in advanced life support protocols. Your council said human medical knowledge was primitive and unnecessary. We offered to establish joint research programs to improve patient care. You demanded we surrender our medical facilities to alien oversight. The children who are dying now are victims of your government's arrogance, not our departure. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions daily, but their meetings quickly devolved into accusations and blame shifting that accomplished nothing. Species that had united in demanding human submission now turned on each other as their individual civilizations crumbled. How did we become so dependent on a single species without anyone noticing? Demanded the Vorthan representative, his translator struggling with the emotional undertones of his distress. The humans integrated themselves into our systems gradually. Over 2 centuries, replied the Morthic delegate. They offered improvements and innovations that seemed beneficial at the time. We never realized how essential they had become. Counselor Vextar's authority crumbled as species after species. Demanded answers he couldn't provide. The Zelfarian military, once the most feared force in the galaxy, was suffering its own series of disasters as ship after ship succumbed to system failures. The ZHS Dominator, flagship of the Zelfarian fleet, drifted helplessly in space after. Its navigation computers developed recursive errors that left the crew unable to plot courses to anywhere. The life support systems were producing an atmospheric mixture that was slowly poisoning the crew, but the environmental controls responded only to human authorization codes that no alien possessed. Admiral Klextar sent desperate messages toward human space, abandoning all pretense of military pride. To any human vessel receiving this transmission, we are requesting immediate humanitarian assistance. Our crew is dying, and we cannot repair our ships without human technical knowledge. The response came from Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the Hughes Vigilant, patrolling the border between human and alien space. Admiral Klextar, your government threatened to invade human colonies if we didn't surrender our independence. Your fleet was going to enforce our subjugation. Figure out your own problems. The Morthic banking system suffered a complete collapse when their quantum encryption algorithms began producing errors that corrupted financial records throughout their confederation. Trillions of credits and transactions were lost or duplicated, essentially erasing the economic history of entire worlds. Secretary of Finance Dan Murphy, former advisor to the Morthic Treasury, watched the chaos unfold from his home in Denver. 1 year after humanity's exodus from galactic civilization, the alien species that had once demanded human submission now faced complete societal collapse. The delegation led by Kilandra of the Kishanti and Zephyr of the Vorthan approached. the edge of human space aboard an unarmed diplomatic vessel, carrying with them the desperate hopes of billions of beings whose civilizations were crumbling. Admiral Robert Hayes watched their approach from the command center of the Sol Defense Station, his weathered face showing no emotion as he reviewed their credentials. The humans had built their defenses well during their year of isolation, creating an impenetrable barrier around their territory that no alien vessel could cross without permission. Admiral Hayes, transmitted Calandra, her normally melodic voice heavy with exhaustion. We come seeking humanitarian assistance for our peoples. The casualties from infrastructure failures now number in the millions across 12 different species. Hayes activated the communication system. His response broadcast throughout both fleets. State your business quickly. You have 1 hour before. Our escort vessels arrive to remove you from human space. Zethner stepped forward, his six-limbed form trembling with what humans had learned to recognize as Vorth in distress. Admiral, surely you don't wish to see innocent civilians die for the mistakes of their governments. We're not asking for political reconciliation, just basic humanitarian aid. Humanitarian aid, Hayes repeated, his voice flat and cold. Like the humanitarian aid you offered when the Chronok slavers attacked our colonies. Like the protection you provided when raiders destroyed our shipping. We learned to help ourselves because you never cared about our suffering. The truth of his words hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. For centuries, humanity had requested assistance during various crises, only to be told that their problems were not the Council's responsibility. Now that the situation was reversed, they expected different treatment. Calandra tried a different approach, appealing to human emotions. Admiral Hayes, there are children dying in alien hospitals because the life support systems are failing. Surely human compassion extends beyond political differences. Hayes's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. The children dying now are victims of their leaders' arrogance, not our indifference. Your governments chose to treat us as servants rather than partners. They demanded our submission rather than offering friendship. The consequences of those choices belong to them. Back on Earth, President Jack Turner received hourly updates on the diplomatic meeting while presiding over an emergency session of the World Council. The human leadership had spent months debating how to respond to inevitable alien requests for assistance. The moral arguments are compelling, said Secretary of Health Angela Davis, reviewing casualty reports from across alien space. Millions of innocent beings are suffering from infrastructure failures that we could easily repair. Secretary of Defense Marcus Webb disagreed strongly. Angela, we offered partnership for 2 centuries and received nothing but demands for submission. If we help them now, we'll be right back where we started, with aliens treating us as their personal maintenance crew. Turner listened to both sides before making the decision that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. We won't let innocent beings die if we can prevent it, but neither will we return to the old system of inequality. Any assistance we provide comes with conditions that ensure this never happens again. Meanwhile, the situation in alien space continued to deteriorate at an accelerating pace. The Morthic Confederation finally fragmented completely when their central government lost the ability to communicate with outer colonies. The quantum communication network that had held their species together for millennia relied on human-designed relay stations that were failing one by one. Trade Minister Kilthese found herself governing only the core worlds, while dozens of Morthic colonies declared independence or simply went silent. The carefully balanced economy that had made her species wealthy collapsed into isolated pocket markets that couldn't support advanced technology. Send another message to human space, she ordered her communications officer. Offer them anything they want. Full trade partnerships, technology sharing, territorial concessions. We're dying out here. The response came from Economic Advisor Bill Watson, formerly Humanities Liaison to Morthic Trade Networks. Minister Kilvis, your people had full access to our communication technology for over a century. We trained your technicians, provided maintenance schedules, and offered to establish joint research programs. You chose to treat us as employees rather than partners. The communication network you're losing was built by human hands that you dismissed as expendable. Similar disasters struck every major alien civilization as complex systems failed without human expertise. The Etherian knowledge. Archives lost another million years of historical data when quantum storage crystals destabilized beyond recovery. The Zeltharian military discovered that 70% of their fleet was permanently grounded due to maintenance issues they couldn't solve. Most shocking of all was the collapse of the Vorthan medical system, once considered the most advanced in the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, former director of Interspecies Medical Cooperation, received desperate pleas from hospitals throughout Vorthan space as their mortality rates skyrocketed. Dr. Mitchell transmitted Dr. Kelvash of the primary Vorthan Medical Center, "We're losing patients who should survive routine procedures. The surgical robots are making microscopic errors. The diagnostic systems are producing false readings. And our life support equipment is failing randomly. Please help us understand what's happening." Sarah's response was clinical and devastating. Dr. Kelvash, the medical systems your hospitals depend on were designed to evolve and adapt through regular updates and calibration. These updates required human oversight because we understood the underlying principles behind the technology. Your medical establishment chose to use our innovations without learning how they actually worked. Now you're discovering that advanced technology requires advanced understanding to maintain. The alien governments attempted increasingly desperate measures to force human cooperation. The Kishanti Empire launched what they called Operation Restoration, sending diplomatic vessels loaded with treasures and trade goods to human space in hopes of buying technical assistance. Ambassador Jake Morrison, now serving as Earth Secretary of Galactic Affairs, received the Kishanti delegation aboard Luna Station. The aliens had brought rare metals, artistic treasures, and scientific samples worth trillions of credits. Secretary Morrison pleaded Ambassador Yilkith, "We offer these gifts as a gesture of goodwill and friendship. Surely the value of these materials demonstrates our sincere desire for reconciliation." Jake examined the treasures with professional interest before responding. Ambassador Yilkith, these are indeed valuable gifts, but they miss the fundamental issue. We never wanted your money or your treasures. We wanted respect, partnership, and equality. Those things cannot be purchased. The Zeltharian hegemony attempted a more aggressive approach, mobilizing what remained of their functional fleet for Operation Recovery. The plan was to approach human space with overwhelming force and demand immediate technical assistance to repair their failing civilization. The mission was commanded by Admiral Klekstar aboard the ZHS destroyer, one of the few Zeltharian vessels still capable of interstellar travel. His fleet of 30 ships represented the last operational military force in Zeltharian space. The expedition ended in complete disaster when the fleet's navigation systems failed during a hyperspace jump to human territory. Instead of emerging at the edge of human space as planned, the ships materialized inside an asteroid field where gravitational anomalies wreaked havoc on their already unstable systems. Captain Diana Foster of the U Sovereignty intercepted there distress signals as the Zeltharian fleet drifted helplessly among the asteroids. Ship after ship reported critical system failures, life support problems, and navigation errors that left them unable to return home. Zeltharian fleet, this is Captain Foster of the Human Defense Force, she transmitted. State your intentions. In human space, Admiral Kleckstar's response revealed the depth of his desperation. Captain Foster, we came seeking technical assistance for our failing infrastructure. Our people are dying, our worlds are going dark, and our civilization is collapsing. We'll accept any terms you offer in exchange for help. Guyana's response was broadcast throughout both human and alien space, ensuring that every government heard humanity's position clearly. Admiral Kleckstar, your fleet approached human territory with hostile intent, just as your government approached human diplomacy with demands for submission. Your current situation is the direct result of choices your leaders made. We offered partnership and received threats of conquest. We offered cooperation and received demands for surrender. The time for negotiations ended when you chose force over friendship. The Zeltharian fleet was eventually rescued by human vessels, but only after half the crews died from life support failures. The survivors were treated humanely and returned to alien space, but the message was clear. Humanity would not be intimidated into providing assistance. 5 years had passed since humanity's dramatic withdrawal from galactic civilization, and the universe bore little resemblance to its former self. The species that had once demanded human submission now struggled to maintain even basic infrastructure. While humanity had emerged as the undisputed power in known space, President Jack Turner stood before the rebuilt United Earth Assembly in Geneva, addressing representatives from every human colony and station. Behind him, massive holographic displays showed the current state of galactic civilization, a patchwork of failing systems and desperate governments that painted a stark picture of decline. 5 years ago, the Galactic Council demanded our submission. For the sake of what they called peace and stability, Turner began, his voice carrying to billions of humans across dozens of star systems. Today, we see the true nature of that stability. It was built on the foundation of human labor, human innovation, and human expertise that they took for granted. The displays showed the collapse of once mighty civilizations. The Galactic Council station itself drifted as a lifeless hulk in space, its life support systems having failed 18 months earlier when the atmospheric recycling units suffered cascading failures. The proud center of interstellar diplomacy had been evacuated in panic, leaving behind centuries of diplomatic archives and priceless cultural artifacts. Director Sam Wilson of Earth's Intelligence Service provided regular briefings on the state of alien civilizations. The Morphic Confederation has fragmented into 47 independent territories, he reported to the Assembly. Their central government collapsed completely when they lost the ability to coordinate trade between their core worlds and outer colonies. The economic data was staggering. Species that had once controlled vast trade networks now operated at medieval levels of commerce, reduced to bartering basic goods between neighboring systems. The sophisticated financial instruments that had enabled galactic civilization's prosperity were useless without the human-designed quantum computers that had made them possible. The Kishanti Empire has lost 60% of their orbital habitats to system failures, Wilson continued. Their population has declined by 30 million beings in the past year alone as life support systems fail faster than they can be repaired. With primitive methods, the Vorthan manufacturing sector, once the envy of the galaxy, had collapsed to pre-space age levels of production. Their factories, dependent on human-calibrated precision machinery, now produced goods so defective that most were unusable. The quality control crisis had destroyed consumer confidence throughout their territory. Vorthan industrial output has fallen to 12% of pre-withdrawal levels, reported economic advisor Linda Chun. Their unemployment rate exceeds 80%, and several of their industrial worlds have experienced complete economic collapse. But the most dramatic transformation had occurred within the Zeltharian hegemony, the species that had led the demands for human submission. Their once mighty military fleet of 10,000 vessels had been reduced to fewer than 1,500. operational ships. The remainder sat in shipyards, awaiting repairs that would never come, their human-designed systems deteriorating beyond recovery. Admiral Diana Foster commanded the human defense fleet from her flagship, the U Sovereignty, monitoring Zeltharian space from a safe distance. Their patrol routes have contracted by 85%, she reported during the monthly security briefing. They can barely maintain control over their core systems, much less project power into neighboring territories. The irony was profound and deliberate. The species that had feared human expansion now struggled to hold their own territory. Several former Zeltharian colonies had declared independence, while others had been conquered by neighboring species who sensed weakness. More telling were the requests for protection that arrived daily at human diplomatic stations. Former Zeltharian colonies, Morthic trading posts, and even some Kishanti settlements offered favorable terms in exchange for basic security services. Secretary of Galactic Affairs Jake Morrison reviewed each request carefully. "We're not interested in building an empire through conquest," he explained to his staff. "But neither will we ignore opportunities to establish relationships with species that approach us respectfully." Some requests were accepted, leading to mutual defense agreements that brought human naval protection to alien worlds in exchange for resources and strategic positioning. These partnerships demonstrated humanity's new approach to galactic relations, based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. Meanwhile, human civilization had undergone its own dramatic transformation during the 5 years of isolation. Freed from alien restrictions and bureaucratic interference, human scientists and engineers had pushed the boundaries of technology far beyond anything the galaxy had previously seen. Dr. Patricia Lee led the breakthrough research at the Luna Advanced Physics Laboratory, where teams worked without the constraints that had once limited their innovations. "We've made more technological progress in these 5 years than in the previous century," she reported to the Scientific Council. "Our new faster-than-light drives are 3 times more efficient than the best alien systems. Our defensive technologies have advanced by entire generations." The results were visible throughout human space. New colonies spread into previously unexplored sectors, each one strengthening humanity's position and expanding their technological base. The mining operations, agricultural worlds, and research stations that dotted human territory operated. With an efficiency that aliens could no longer match, human ships moved through space with casual confidence, protected by defensive systems that made them virtually invulnerable to alien weapons. The same species that had once threatened human colonies now watched nervously as human vessels patrolled trade routes that had been abandoned by failing alien governments. Captain Tony Rodriguez, now commanding the exploration vessel UES Pioneer, reported from the edge of known space. "We've established first contact with 6 previously unknown species in the past year alone. All of them are interested in trade relationships and technological cooperation. None of them show any interest in joining the old Galactic Council system." These new species had heard about humanity's withdrawal and its consequences. They approached human diplomats with respect and caution, recognizing that the humans possessed both the technology and the strength to be valuable allies or dangerous enemies. Ambassador Carol Peterson, formerly humanity's liaison to the Etherian Collective, reflected on the transformation during a speech at the Colonial Academy. "The aliens said we were too dangerous for their peaceful galaxy. They were right, but not in the way they imagined. We were dangerous to their stagnation, their complacency, their assumption that advanced species should dominate primitive ones." The Etherian Collective itself had suffered perhaps the most tragic decline of all the former Council species. Their ancient archives, repositories of millions of years of accumulated knowledge, had lost nearly 40% of their content to data corruption and system failures. The species that prided itself on preserving galactic wisdom was watching its own heritage disappear into digital oblivion. Most significantly, the shared experience of rejection and triumph had forged unprecedented unity among humanity's scattered populations. National boundaries that had once defined Earth's politics became administrative conveniences rather than sources of conflict. Colonial settlements that might have developed separate identities instead saw themselves as part of a greater human community. "We speak with one voice now," observed social analyst Dr. Frank Miller during his study of post-withdrawal human society. The threat of alien domination created a unity that centuries of Earth politics never achieved. We're not just Americans, or Europeans or Africans anymore. We're humans, and that identity transcends all others. This unity manifested in practical ways throughout human space. Resources flowed freely between colonies based on need rather than national origin. Scientific discoveries were shared instantly across all human territories. Military forces operated under unified command structures that made them far more effective than the fragmented alien militaries they might face. As the 5th anniversary of the withdrawal approached, humanity received an unexpected communication from the remnants of the Galactic Council. The message was transmitted from the emergency government established on Kepler 442b. After the Council station's abandonment, the transmission was signed by representatives from all surviving Council species, including Vextar of the Zeltharians. Though his once proud voice now carried notes of desperation and defeat. To the human species, we acknowledge the catastrophic failures of our past policies and the tragic consequences of our arrogance. We humbly request humanitarian assistance for our suffering populations and the opportunity to establish new relationships based on equality and mutual respect. President Turner convened a special session of the Earth Assembly to consider the request. The debate was lengthy and passionate, with representatives arguing both sides of a complex moral and strategic question. We have the power to save millions of lives, argued Senator Maria Santos from the Luna colony. Our medical technology could restore their failing hospitals.